proud to you this morning. I'm Margaret Dinnick, the chair of the North East branch of AFT, and on behalf of the committee and all of the North East AFT members, I want to give you a really warm welcome to Durham. You've got the most beautiful weather for coming here to see the city at its best. And as you're coming in, you might have noticed some photographs playing, and they were just some areas of special interest and really beautiful areas around the North East. Some of them are in Durham. So if you get the chance to have a look around while you're here, that'd be lovely. And if not, I hope you're tempted to come back again and visit us. We're very proud and we're really delighted to be hosting the AFT 40th anniversary conference here in the North East. And we've already had a good start with the pre-conference session. And as you can see from the programme, it's going to be a very interesting and exciting couple of days together. I hope that you all enjoy it. Before I hand over to Barbara Warner, who's going to officially open the conference, I've just got a few housekeeping things that I need to mention. First of all, I'll tell you regarding the programme, there has been a change to the programme tomorrow afternoon. You probably got an email about it. Unfortunately, Julie Taylor isn't able to present that workshop, and we have Matt Selman who's agreed to do that workshop for us, and that would be really interesting. What we've got are lists outside, in that area outside of the room. If you can get your name down to book onto those 4 sessions tomorrow afternoon, you need to book one at 1:30 and another one at 2:30. So if you can just do that as soon as it's convenient to do so. I've got my list of things, because I've got a few things to mention. The fire alarms I've already mentioned. We're not expecting a fire alarm, so if it goes off, we exit. There's some fire doors here and also through those doors there. It's a no smoking hotel, so for those who do want to partake, then there's an area outside the back and an area outside of the front as well. It's designated areas. A gentle reminder that if you haven't already put your phones onto silent, would you mind doing that for us? One of the other things I was asked to mention is that the speakers are going to provide their PowerPoints, and these will be passed on to you, will be emailed on to you, so you will all get copies of those. Another thing, you may have noticed that between 10:30 and 2 today and tomorrow, we've got a book stand from Blackwell Publishers and from the Durham Tourist Information Board, and it would be really worthwhile visiting those very interesting stands. I think I'm just about there. Is there anything else that I've missed? Oh, there is. And Tanya asked me to mention that when we're due to come back into the room again, she's got a little bell that she's going to ring to get your attention. She's not just doing it because she fancies ringing a little bell. It is to get your attention and get you back into the room again. So that will be happening just at times when we need you to come back in. Okay, have I done it now? I've covered the things, I think so, yes. So, I'd now like to introduce Barbara Warner to you, who is a long-standing member of AFT. She was the National Chair of AFT between 2004 and 2007. She was also the Chair of the Professional Affairs Committee, and until recently she was the Chair of the Ethics Committee and is still a member of the Ethics Committee. We're delighted to say that she's still going to remain on our AFT Advisory Committee for the Board as well. So would you like to join me in welcoming Barbara Warner, please?
Hello everybody, and thank you for that introduction. Well, it's my job to welcome everybody to the 40th anniversary of AFT. It feels like the whole of my career. You know, I started doing social work back in the early 70s and then moved into family therapy because it was a new model that was a great help to my work. And from there, it's just gone on. And I'm here to represent the AFT board, to welcome you all, to represent past chairs, those that are in the room. We have a few people in the room, Jill and Alan in particular, who were my teachers at AFT when I first did my basic training. And I'd also like to mention one other name from the past. I don't know if anybody here would remember Erica Schneider from Birmingham. Yes, great. Because when I was working with Bernardo's there, we brought Erica in to teach us introductory family therapy. So I'm really glad you remember that, Alan. It's a great connection.
Quite achievement remembering it.
Well, me too, yeah. And I'd also commend to you the lovely timeline that BB Speed has put on the wall at the back of the room next door, which really shows how AFT in particular and family therapy in this country has progressed in the last 40 years. And before, because I see you started in 1948, BB, with the ideas from America. No, I understand that. You probably not even thought of then, but to start there where the ideas began was great, yeah. So, welcome everybody, it's great to have you all here. The other thing I want to say is, there are people in this room that I know and know very well, but there are also a huge number of people here who I don't know, and that really feels good, because it shows to me that family therapy has spread and grown, and has grown here in the northeast as well as in other parts of the UK. So it's a real delight to have lots of people I don't know in the room. What else do I want to say? Yeah, I want to also point out that our publications have grown so well over this time. JFT is now in libraries across the world, which is absolutely wonderful and is very well cited in people's research around the world. That's a great development. And Context still remains an interesting, vibrant magazine where we can write and talk to each other about the work that's developing around the country, and that's really good to see as well. Right, challenges for the future. I wanted to mention that although family therapy has grown, although we've developed a profession, something I wasn't at all sure would happen. In fact, I voted against it early on. There was a sort of a vote, is it a model or is it a profession? And I said, always a model, and I was wrong. We now have a profession as well. But I do think it's really important we carry both these strands together, so that it's still a model and a method that is used amongst a number of professions, as well as having the profession developing. And I'm sure we'll continue to use our systemic skills to see that they both survive despite whatever political climate we're working in, because things have gone forward in comfortable climates and now they're taking a bit of a backward step, but I'm sure it will continue, and we can depend on the younger members to carry it forward into the future. So, with no further ado, I'd like to open the conference and also to introduce, let me get your name right, Esther Cohen-Tovey, who is the Clinical Director of Psychological Services for Northumberland, Tyne and Wear NHS Trust. So welcome to you.
Hello everybody. Thank you very much for that introduction. My name is Esther Cohen-Tovey and I'm indeed Clinical Director of Psychological Services in NTWFT. I'm a clinical psychologist by background, and I'm afraid to say my therapeutic modality is CBT. So thank you very much for letting me in the door. But I must say, having attended John's workshop this morning, I found it incredibly useful and could see how very much we have in common actually across these modalities. So I'm really delighted to be here. I am I've lived in the North East for 22 years. Both my children are Geordies. However, I don't think they would understand any of the language that Tony Roth told us about earlier on today. I don't have any funny stories about my children to offer you because I didn't realise that was part of the agenda. But I am here to welcome you on behalf of NTW and also T. Weir Foundation Trust. We're the two largest provider trusts in this area in the North East of mental health and disability services. So between us, we do employ the vast majority of people who are working as family therapists and offering systemic and family therapies. So on behalf of both trusts and the NHS at large, I'm delighted to be here to welcome the Association of Family Therapy and all of you to this fantastic event. I'm just going to, in line with the looking back, looking forward theme, I'm going to just say a very few words, a little potted history perhaps, about family therapy and systemic therapies in the North East. And I've been helped to pull that together very much by Alex Reid and Tony Forster. But any mistakes are my responsibility. And after that, I'm just going to say a few words about where we are now and looking ahead to the future. I hesitate to do this because to follow this morning's history of the North East and what goes on in the North East for those of you who are here. I'm afraid this is not going to be done in that vein, but it's very much a homage to those people, both local and national, who've contributed to those developments in this area. So our potted history starts approximately late 1970s, early 1980s, with our first training programme in systemic and family therapy, which was developed at the University of Northumbria across the water, and that was then our local polytechnic, by Ruth Ray, Margaret Moran and Maureen Gilman. And I believe that Ruth Ray is with us today somewhere. Welcome, Ruth. I was talking with colleagues at the break, and it does really seem that having a training course in an area really is a crucial part of allowing family therapy to develop and flourish. And that course feels like it was very much the impetus and the starting point in our area. An interest in family therapy grew, and local family therapy teams began to form. And in those days, the method of working was very much using viewing rooms, and these were often rigged up with TV cameras and viewing it in an adjacent office, or I understand often in a cupboard. So for all of you who've had to hunch in cupboards in order to play your part in the emergence of family therapy, well done. Thank you for enduring that. Hopefully we have much, much better facilities today, and of course practice has moved on. Expatriate Geordie John Burnham, who I only learned today comes from Heaton, very near to where I live these days in Fenham, was a key person in providing crucial support to our course and also to our practitioners. And our course developed further, particularly by Alex Reid and Maureen Gilman, and is nationally recognised, as I'm sure everyone here will know. A systemic supervision course was also developed at Northumbria, and a systemic management course at the University of Sunderland. So we're rich in these training opportunities in the North East. In the 1990s, influenced particularly by the late Jim Birch, we saw a move to reflective team working and dialogical approaches. And also the development of group solution-focused approaches, supported particularly by the work of John Wheeler, who I believe is speaking later on in this programme. Foundation courses in family therapy began to emerge, first in Sunderland, and then in other areas locally, including Northumberland, Newcastle, Teesside, and also our doctorate in clinical psychology course at Newcastle. Some of our key local innovators, and apologies for people that I've missed off this list, but some of those people were Mandy Thompson, Paul Jackson, Alice Chung, and Maya Thomas. More recently, collaboration between the two big trusts, NTW and Tees Eskimo Valley, and Meriden in the West Midlands, has led to large-scale training programmes in behavioural family therapy interventions for psychosis. And behavioural and systemic approaches are now being integrated into mainstream treatment pathways for psychosis, particularly drawing on the work of Frank Burbach and colleagues. Systemic family practice training for children and young people's IAPT is a very recent development, in which both TUV and NTW are involved through our local collaborative, which is also hosted at Northumbria University. So it's really great to see that over the last 30 to 40 years, we've had a history of local innovation and expertise combining with national expert support and contributions. And those have been kind of woven together to produce a vibrant and skilled community of systemic and family therapy practitioners, supervisors and trainers all across the North East. And if you think about just how many service users and families have benefited from that over that period, that just is very moving for me to think about all of those benefits. And again, in the workshop here today, people talk about their practice and the benefits that they've seen for the people that they work with. I think we all need to acknowledge, of course, that's why we're all here, and just to think of that impact is absolutely fabulous. I'd just like now to bring us back to the present day And again, apologies for all the developments that I've missed, and I'm sorry if I've missed something that was important to people in this room. If someone other than myself had been talking about the history of family therapy in the North East, I'm sure we could have taken up the whole morning. I'd like to just say a bit about where we are now. In my role as Clinical Director of Psychological Services in NTW, I've had a lead role in service redesign in the last couple of years, and we have recently completely redesigned, or we're in the middle of a process of redesigning our community services in order to deliver evidence-based care packages and pathways. And many of you will be aware the recent second national audit of schizophrenia showed that the implementation of evidence-based psychological therapies, family therapy and CBT is really very patchy across the country, and almost nowhere is it spot on. Nowhere have we got the degree of access to those therapies for service users that we ought to see. Our trust was sort of middle of the road in that. We definitely need to and want to improve upon that. And our service redesign is enabling us to ensure that family therapy is embedded into our psychosis pathways particularly, but also so that we've got that resource in our pathways so that where it's appropriate we can access that for people in need from the non-psychosis pathway as well. Working with families training is now regarded as an essential across all our service settings in NTW, so as many people as possible are encouraged to do foundation training, and training is delivered within teams as well. Surprisingly, in our trust, we've got more family therapy resource in our adult services than in our children and young people services, which is quite unusual. We do want to build and further develop that resource within our children and young people services. And we also are participating, as I mentioned, in the Children and Young People's IAP programme. And that's now happening in most of the areas that we serve through the collaborative. And this will improve access to family therapy for those young people and their families. We have a family therapy network in NTW, and that is thriving. Our foundation courses are thriving. And I want to finish with the sort of hot off the press latest news. In NTW, we are bringing together a centre of specialist psychological therapies. And initially, this was about bringing together our specialist therapies that mostly have a regional focus. Our CBT centre in NTW has a regional remit, as does our psychodynamic psychotherapy centre, which is previously based in Claremont House and has moved now to be with the other services at Benfield House in Newcastle, along with cognitive analytic therapy, a smaller service. We have agreed very recently that family therapy will be part of that specialist centre for psychological therapies. So family therapy has got a proper home at last. I was talking to Alex briefly at the break, and he was saying how much he wished he had been here for that. We miss Alex very much. He's been a fantastic lead for family therapy in our trust for many years. I'm really pleased that family therapy is going to be able to contribute to and benefit from all of the opportunities that will arise in that centre in terms of expert therapy, training, supervision and research. And I'm really looking forward to continuing to work with our current lead for family therapy in NTW, Kevin Hawkes, as we move on to the next chapter of the development of family therapy in the North East. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther, for inviting us to look back at the developments of family therapy in the North East, and also to think about the exciting things that are going to happen ahead for psychological therapies and family therapy as well. I'd now like to introduce John Burnham again. I can't do it as well as Tony Ross did earlier on, for those of you who are here and heard that, so I'll just ask John now to...
Thank you. Well, it hardly seems like 5 minutes or something. Thank you, Esther. I was at the centre, the specialist centre. What road is it on? It's in Keaton, isn't it? Well, Walker Gate, yeah. And it's a lovely building with some fantastic facilities for work with families and groups and things like this. Fantastic. It's good news. It was, I'm going to... Well, I've been here before. I'm going to show what I'm going to talk about on PowerPoint, because sometimes my experience with the mic is that sometimes it moves out. And that hearing isn't always easy in different parts. So I'll put it in. Daring to be different, a time to remember, looking back at the future. After 40 years, I might just stop there. I was asked, and typical of me, say, will you do this, will you do that? I always say, oh yes, that would be great. And afterwards you think, you know, what am I going to do? So being invited to the opening preview of this auspicious occasion is a great honour, especially since it's in the northeast, where I'm from, and I still call home, or Yemen, to be precise. And yet, I couldn't think of what to say. I sat down a number of times, what to write or what to do. I wasn't sure, it wasn't about my work in particular, it was about the organisation, but there was so much to talk about, so many things have happened in 40 years, so many people have done so many things. People who have been kind of in the foreground, but many and most people in the background doing all of the kind of hard work for a voluntary basis in AFT and so on. So it was just an enormous task. And I thought, well, that'll pass, I told myself, but it didn't. So on my shelf at home, I've got all the past editions of Context and stuff, and I thought, I know I'll have a look in there, see what I can pinch. And when I looked at the early ones, when you see the more recent ones, glossies and things like this, so when I look back at the past ones, there's the first one I found. So there's quite a change. I think there's evidence of progress there. But one thing, a little gem I found, well, I've written instructions to myself, inspiration context, or the newsletter, as it was called then, and I've instructed myself, show the newsletter. So show the newsletter. But there was one in this one, in winter of 1978 and 1979. And there's a letter, a dissenting voice, so I thought, daring to dissent, that will fit into this conference. And it's from Tony Nichols. I don't know if Tony Nichols is around. Sorry? Well, he signed himself Tony, so I'll have a word with him about that. He wrote, it's a letter, not an article. He says, let's just get this right. I have noticed from a recent circular of the AFT National that my name is down as being connected with a regional group of the AFT in Newcastle. In fact, this is not quite the case, as we have set up our own organisation here, the Tyneside Family Therapy Association. I understand that the conference this year is wanting to give some time to regional family therapy activities, and it seems appropriate for me to say something about the activities of the Tyneside Family Therapy Association. We set up a separate organisation because the London-based Association of Family Therapy didn't really seem to be quite what was needed in Newcastle and surrounding areas. So we've set up something, and we've got a membership of 176 with regular meetings attended by over 50 members. So that was declaring something, but they weren't in AFT, they were their own AFT. And he closes with this paragraph. He said, we would very much like to develop stronger links with the Association for Family Therapy. Remember, this is 1978. Indeed, you may feel it would be nice to have a future annual meeting of the AFT in Newcastle, or the North East, in which case you would be most welcome. There may be other ways we can form links, for example. We will be most grateful for any speakers or leaders who feel they can venture this far north and can assure them that their journey will be rewarded. Well, it's only taken 40 years. Isn't it fantastic that you find something like that in the moment of your desperation? So, what's next? Come on. Inspiration and perspiration. Somebody said any kind of achievement is 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. And now, Alan and Jill, I wrote this down before I knew you were coming. So early AFT conferences, led by pioneers such as Alan and Jill, inspired me and many others to commit myself to the rigours of training as a family therapist. That's the perspiration. Even though there were no jobs as family therapists or designated family therapists at that time, there wasn't even a thought that there would be. There wasn't even a thought that would happen. We were all, I don't know about happy, but we were working, I was working as a social worker, people were psychologists, psychiatrists, nurses, occupational therapists, people who are drawn to this way of working found that something it fitted for them, and whatever their discipline. And in some ways, some of the original teams were not so much multidisciplinary as transdisciplinary. You know, they may be doing their own work in their own disciplines of kinds, but when they were together, it was transdisciplinary. We were working to the same models, the same ideas, whoever we were, whatever our discipline of origin. And then we got to create a profession. And the drive to create a profession seemed both strong and contentious. There was, I think, a lot of debate about this. You know, was it the right thing to do? Would it kind of create an elite and that people would stop practicing so widely, and we'd have a small group of people, well, referring lots of families to, who couldn't be seen? Or did we want to spread the knowledge? And I think that we've waxed and waned through those, and I think the IAP development is another sign of returning to that, spreading and getting lots of people to be able to practice and open the space for many families. So AFT named what we did as psychotherapy. That wasn't the only name we used. And in fact, when we went to the UKCP, they looked at the number of labels that different schools, different, what were we called? The divisions?
Modalities. Colleges.
Colleges, yeah. Before colleges it was...
Modalities.
No, it wasn't modalities. It was something. Anyway, the different groups of people, sections. Sections. And now what was I saying? Yes. So look at all the labels that you could call yourself in each section, and we had 37. Other groups had 1. The maximum was 5. We had 37: marital and family, family and marital, systemic marital family and systemic, and stuff like this. You know, all this kind of multiplicity of views was just madness, and we were instructed to reduce. We got down to 15, I think. The sexual.
Yes.
Or,
50, that's it.
don't forget it. What is it again? Yes, that was in this section's name, but yeah. So we joined with these other organisations and pushing for statutory registration, which still hasn't been achieved. The meetings which I attended on behalf of KCC then, but there were people from AFT, AFT, TAVI, and the other significant training organisations. The rugby conference, that's the place, not the game, was where we started, and kind of a motley crew of people agreed to kind of be able to work together. The tensions were very high. I mean, because if you thought the tensions within sections were high, when we started to talk across sections, it was almost impossible. Then that became the United Kingdom Standing Conference on Psychotherapy, and I think we moved it down to Canterbury, on the top of a hill. And became the United Kingdom Council for Psychotherapy. Now, attending those meetings, I don't know about if anybody here has been to them, but certainly beginning, there's a feeling of impostership. We experienced, I certainly did, and other people I talked to, experienced what Stephen Brookfield refers to as impostership, being amongst all these real psychotherapists. I mean, some of them smoke pipes. That's why I grew up, yeah. There are 2 stories that stand out as being good. It would have been intolerable, I think, in any people across all fields, you know, in our field, in any performance field, people experience this aspect of impostership. There was an opera singer who was going on, she said she goes to the front of the stage, she has marvellous reviews, she's been doing it for years, she's like, go to the front of the stage, and any moment I'm expecting somebody to tap me on the shoulder and say, the real opera singer's come now, you can go home. John Bing Hall said something about that for therapists. He said, remember, when you're in the room, you're the best therapist there is, because you're in the room and nobody else is. So 2 stories stand out that made a difference, I think, for us. I was sitting there, the sections tend to stay together, and it was kind of tight until the drama therapist got there. And then the drama therapist was he brought some dinky cars, and we were racing dinky cars across the room and things like that. And everybody joined in, and that began to break some of it. But when we got down to discussing official things, the tensions were strong. So I was sitting at lunch with this guy from the psychoanalytic section, and he said to me, how many hours of personal therapy do your students have to have? And I thought, this is it. Found out. I am an investor. And I said, well, they can have as many as they like. But they don't have to have any. He said, none, he says. No. So I kind of sat there and chewed away and things like this and so on, and thought I would just ease my way out. And then I said, tell me, how many hours of live supervision do your trainees have to have? He says, what's live supervision? I says, it's when you actually see what your trainees do, not just what they tell you that they do. Ah, he says, no. None, I says. So I think in that moment it was broken for me, I think other people did. We began to look at the values of the organisation, and that personal therapy, as an example of things, had been held as a benchmark. That's what you had to do, not what it was designed to achieve. And I think it was Jill who came up with the phrase. She said that there are many ways in which a trainer can help a therapist to learn how they're part and parcel of the process. Personal therapy may be one, but live supervision, post-session, pre-session discussions, PPD groups, they're all different methods to achieve that goal. But personal therapy isn't the only way. And I think that began to, I think AFT representatives have been very important as chairs of training, and they've really got all sections to look at what values are they trying to do and live and practice when they're doing a particular piece of practice. Not just hold that up, that's the way we do it, so that's the way that other people may do it. The storm. There was a big debate over how many votes different sections should have. And the psychoanalysts thought that they should have the most number of votes. They were the proper therapy, and they should have the most number of votes to be able to influence policy and so on and so forth. And then somebody from, I think, the cognitive and behavioural sections stood up and began to, gently, respectfully, ask questions about this. And just as he did this, a storm blew up, and there was a roof, plastic roof on the dome of this thing, which started to really lift and bang, bang, bang. And the guy from the CBT section said, just said, well, perhaps not then. But I think him sitting down in that way made people laugh and began to just ease some of these kind of restrictions. And I think gradually people began to listen to the arguments that people were making, whatever sections they were from. Does this make sense? It doesn't have to come. Sometimes you'd sit and somebody from your own section would talk and you think, well, I'm not so sure about it. And somebody from another section would talk, yeah, that makes more sense. And I think that began to break down the barriers. And I don't think it would have happened. There was a man called Michael Pocconi who chaired that organisation right from the beginning through for a long period of time. And he was a psychoanalyst, but he was really respectful of other approaches. And when he learned about life supervision, he said, yes, I'd love to be able to see what they tell me, because it takes you ages to find out just through guessing right after what they tell you. So a number of members of AFT have gone on to make notable contributions to UKCP. And I was going to say especially, but for every name I mentioned, there'll be 10 I don't. So I'm not going to name more. You know who you are. There's lots of them. Where have we got to? Without context, there is no reading. So I went, I know this is not the latest edition now, but when I was preparing this edition of Context, Systemic Approaches to Children's Social Care was the latest, edited by Nick Penry. And so I thought, I've looked at the older ones, now let me look at the more recent ones. Fast forward, February 2015, additional context. the focus on children's social care. And I looked through the articles, and I was drawn to the title of one, Liz Bosenke. Is that Bosenke? Is that how you pronounce that? Is Liz here? Oh, well, she won't mind. Liz Bosenke posed a question. Can you be systemic in a social work crisis? And my first impression, why are we still asking that question? We were asking that, when you look back in puberty, we were asking that question ages ago. Aren't you just reinventing the wheel? What course did you do? So that was an initial, very, I'm sharing because I've changed my view, but very unkind kind of thing. Surprised, why are you still asking that question? So I just said what I've just said. And then, when I read the article, I realised it's the same question, but the answers are different. If you look back, if you look over it, these questions arise and punctuate the history. And you can be thinking, are you just reinventing the wheel? Well, you can make a better wheel. You can. I know I've recently taken up doing triathlons and spending money on bikes, and you can, I thought a wheel was a wheel. It was round and it went round. And it would depend on how hard you press the pedals, how fast it went round. But I've learned that there are wheels that go faster than other wheels. So it's not just a matter of reinventing the wheel, there are many wheels. There are many ways to do this. And so when I read the article, the answer was multi-layered, pragmatic, and securely based in a range of theories, compared to earlier articles, which were often located in one particular theory, and wasn't so well embedded, and with more evidence base as well. So the questions can continue to be asked. Personally speaking, it just reminded me of, I've been married twice, and my eldest daughter, as she was growing up and I spent time with her, asked me why I left on a number of occasions. And at one time I was thinking, why is she still asking me? I've told her that. But as she grew up, the answer that she required was different. So I think it's as we develop, the questions may often be the same, but the answers will be quite different. We'll be better at answering it, and coping and answering it in a way that informs a wider range of people than ourselves. I think the earlier answers convinced ourselves. Now we have to convince other people. And this finding, just in this edition, was evident in other articles, especially Barbara McKay's Systemic Landscapes of Thinking and Practice in Interagency Needs. If you haven't read that, read it. It's an absolutely brilliant piece of work. Barbara also happens to be a Geordie, but that didn't influence me at all. Another thing, just in my practice, about moderating my own passion for this work, my own kind of desire that other people train in this way and become family therapists, systemic therapists, and so on. Because I feel pretty passionate about that. I've run training courses for many years, and I try to talent spot amongst the people who come on the courses and in the staff groups and the inpatient units and kind of encourage them and so on. And then you wouldn't believe it, but not everybody wants to be a family therapist. They don't. It's hard to believe. But once I started to shift on this, a couple of episodes helped me. A psychiatrist who came for 6 months, as they did on rotation, spent 6 months with us. As she left, she said, I came here as a biologically oriented psychiatrist. And I was waiting for her to say, but now I want to be a family therapist. I can give this all up. Where's the application form? She said, and I leave here as a biologically oriented psychiatrist. But I now understand the context. She said, when I'm talking to somebody about their mental health, when I'm thinking about prescribing them, giving them medication, I've got to think about what this means for them. This is not just a tablet, but who else in your family may take medication? What would be their views of you taking this and listening to what would be their view of you attending to see me for future meetings? What if this tablet works? Who will you use the energy that it gives you in order to go for walks with and so on and so forth. So she says, I'm starting from a biological base, but I now have expanded my view in the meanings of what I'm doing, so I might be more effective. Whether or not you agree with the medication, I thought I was in some ways more pleased with that than her saying, and now I want to be a family therapist. And just recently, Kate Inslee, excellent nurse who trained to an immediate level, I've been trying to entice on, not entice on, been shoving on to the course. She says, but John, I want to be a nurse. I want to be a nurse. I like doing systemic things as a nurse, but I want to be a nurse. Her mother was a nurse, her grandmother was a nurse, you know, but she doesn't want to break that tradition. And kind of learning from other modalities. There were, I don't know if you have the experience, but some psychiatrists train as psychotherapists, as a specialty, you know, and they go on rotation and have to have 900 hours of clinical supervision to complete the course. And it's usually 700 their main orientation and 100 each in the other two. And it's usually psychodynamic 700 hours, though I think in London it changed a little bit. 100 hours of CBT and 100 hours of systemic. So these folk had done 700 hours of psychodynamic, they'd done their CBT, and they hadn't done any systemic. And so they were working with adults, but they came to our service in order to gain those 100 hours. And when I first met them, I was sure they would rather have done 100 hours of community service than come and train with us when they saw the screens and the video and that kind of exposure that they were just not used to. Anyway, I used approach, method and technique to look at the kind of different, compare and contrast what we did, and we learned to get along. And one of the first things, as it went by, they came in as a reflecting team. And we talked about it, they were uncertain about it, but the first time I did it with a couple I've been working with for a while, who are very experienced with reflecting teams and so on. So I said to the couple, this team, and named them, it's their first time as a reflecting team. So you're familiar, so they'll be looking for a bit of feedback about how they do. You know. They said, okay, that's fine. So they came in, Julie, and they sat. And they sat. And I thought, my heart rate started. I thought, they're going to do a reflecting silence. And they're not going to say anything, you know? So anyway, after that, one of them spoke, and spoke very respectfully. They connected to the language of the family, what the issues were, in the way that we talked about and that we practiced. And they spoke and so on, quite slowly, deliberately and so on. Then she stopped, and there was quite a pause, and then the next person spoke. My heart rate returned to something like normal, went round. And when they left, I said to the couple, what did you think of that? They said, well, it's certainly very different to the other reflecting teams that we've experienced. They seem to get a little bit more excited and animated and start to have a conversation with one another. You know, sometimes you feel left out of it. You know? And that experience, I think, they said each one of them spoke slowly enough for you to be able to follow. And the next one didn't speak. They allowed you time to think about what the first person said before they spoke. And that was such an important, I don't know if they did that deliberately or just it was their style. And I think the introduction of pauses, which I do struggle with, I admit, I've made myself, you know, just hanging on for those few extra seconds. Often, you've asked a question, and sometimes you think, oh, have I not asked it right? And then you reshape it. You just hang on that bit longer. Either in therapy or training, somebody will then be able to speak if you give them that time to think about the question. Because some of the questions, as I asked and said, some of the questions we ask require an IQ of 148 to understand. You know, we can make a double reflexive loop, future-oriented, hypothetical, landscape of orientation question. So that was learning from other modalities, from them, from other colleagues and so on. And I think that enriched and began to moderate my kind of the purest position I'm taking. Jill Gora Barnes, in the therapeutic relationship, described the first meeting between a family and a therapist as like two dogs sniffing each other's bottoms. And that really caught on with me, though I later went on to define this as relational reflexivity. And oh, how we've moved on. But that image stayed with me for a long time. I think I'm just about to finish, but I'm just going to say that enduring issues in the field, manualisation versus collaborative practices. And I think there's a difference between certainty and clarity. And I think clarity is when we can be clear about and transparent about what we're doing, what families can expect, what work we're doing, and so on, so on, why we're doing it. That can slip into certainty, but avoiding certainty at the cost of clarity, I think, is something of a mistake. And certainly in our inpatient units, the introduction of a manualised family-based treatment approach has, in some ways, is seen as a first-order approach, but it has reaped second-order benefits. Now, it's stopped that we have an upstairs-downstairs physical relationship. The wards are downstairs and the psychotherapy officers are upstairs, and the nurses often thought that all the clever therapy work went on upstairs and the hard work in managing the children and so on went on downstairs. And when they came into therapy sessions, the therapist was being spontaneous, creative, and couldn't follow them. Now with the manual that we all follow together, and you can be creative within that, the nurses feel much more confident about talking with the families about the work that's done. When they come to the meeting, they're sure that they can often take a lead and part of the session and so on. So in terms of the family's experience of a cohesive staff group, that first order approach has reaped second order benefits, and I think there's more to that. The purist and the integrationist, a long battle, but I think it's a complementary relationship. I think without purists, the eclectics or the integrationists wouldn't have anything to choose between. No? Without the integrationists, the purists would get very lonely and isolated and not find out how what they're doing could be used in other contexts. So I think it's probably going to be an ongoing dilemma. What of the future? We're all part of the future for AFT. For some of us, that future is a bit shorter than others. But nevertheless, it is called the future. And I just propose that we take this time to ask some questions, or for you to consider some questions as you approach the rest of the conference and the next 40 years. Some questions for you as members of the body of AFT. So if you want to, you might do this in groups of one for a while. Pick a question. You don't have to go through this, but have a think about, when did I join the AFT journey? What drew me to join AFT? What keeps me here? Because those might be two different things. You might have both of them still. What have I contributed to AFT? Think about Barry Mason's idea of creating a culture of contribution as well as achievements which tend to be individualised. How do I intend to contribute to AFT in the future? What difference does it make to my practice? What difference does it make to how I feel about myself as a practitioner? How does or might being within the membership of AFT enable you to dare to be different? So if you kind of have a think about that on your own or talk to somebody else. We've got 9 minutes, have we? Okay. 6. I didn't. Is there a time zone between Birmingham? Oh, have you got 5 minutes to do it at the end? Okay. So I was going to say to leave between tables, go and chat to somebody else, but just to pick out a couple of questions or one question. Have a chat about that. Anyway, to prepare yourself. Obviously, we wouldn't be able to go around and ask everybody, but I don't know if there's one or two little comments or responses you might make about what you're thinking about, particularly what contribution you might make to AFT and what committee you'd like to join. Any thoughts, or should I just leave it with you to behind it. Okay? So, again, thank you very much for asking me to do this. It's been a great pleasure and honour to do so. So, thank you very much.
It just falls to me to thank John for that really lovely coverage from the beginning to the future. And I'd also echo his question, what are you going to do to be part of AFT in the future? I'd also like to add something that I forgot in my earlier thing, which was to thank the North East branch for bringing us here to Durham, because it's such a lovely place and it's such a warm and welcoming conference that we've come into. So I want to thank you, Margaret, and your committee very much. It's great to be here.